Billy Childs, on behalf of WUSF 89.7 FM, All Night Jazz, thank you for giving us some of your valuable time today. You're one of the most prolific, busy artists I think I know. And I'm going to give our listeners an insight into how this interview came about, because I think it gives an insight into your life and career, really. We were emailing back and forth. You've got a brand new album coming out on Mac Avenue in a few weeks, which we'll talk about. But you were busy and you were sort of saying, sorry, I'm really busy. And whilst prepping some time to release a new album for Mac Avenue of your trio in a jazz context, you're like, I'm sorry I'm running late. I'm just finishing my violin concerto. And that kind of like encapsulated your whole career so far to me. And just that one sentence in an email. We've all had some degree of classical training and some degree of classical music being important in our life. But I feel for you that the two things really do run concurrently alongside each other. Was that always the case for you?
Well, thanks for having me on the show, first of
Pleasure.
all. Yeah, I never really, I guess I've carved out maybe a parallel career as a jazz artist and also a classical composer. But I never really had a master plan to do that. I love all music, and I love music that really moves me. And growing up in Los Angeles and growing up in my household where my parents had really eclectic tastes in music, I got to hear everything from Joe Beam to Barbra Streisand to the modern jazz quartet and then I have two older sisters who one of which introduced me to jazz, the other introduced me to Laura Nyro and other stuff. So I grew up in a household where music was kind of all the time, all encompassing and happened all the time, and very, very many different styles of music. And also growing up with the film music had to have elements of jazz and classical in it, and combine it, because what worked in dramatic music didn't know any genres. If it was a jazz, the composer might feel that it was more expedient to have a jazz cue there or a classical cue. So I grew up with all of this music, and it kind of sifted its way into my DNA.
Right. You have a degree in music and composition from USC. You're a Californian, LA born and bred guy. Was your degree in the late 70s, was that in classical music or classical composing or jazz composing?
No, it was classical.
Right.
And my teachers were a guy named Robert Lynn, who pretty much changed my whole conception of how to compose. Robert Lynn was, well, he just introduced me in a very subtle and gentle way, introduced me into the techniques, analysis and, composition, contrapuntal exercises, writing in different forms, making me aware of the various forms of classical music.
Right.
And he also did this. He was a very kind person and a very inclusive person. So he, aside from being a brilliant composer and a brilliant teacher, he was a student of Darius Milhaud also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing connection.
Yeah.
Billy Childs, your teacher, Darius Milhaud.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So he allowed me to incorporate my jazz language, which was already formulated at that time at age 18 and 19. And he allowed me to incorporate that into these techniques that he was teaching me. So he was very, very important in my development. And so I studied. When I graduated from high school, I was accepted at three different colleges. I was accepted at USC, I was accepted at Berkeley, and New England Conservatory.
That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, it was really great. And New England Conservatory and Berkeley accepted me as a jazz composition major or a jazz performance major. And I I was very tempted to go there. I actually visited both places in the summer of '74. And I decided I wanted to go to USC because I had been playing jazz gigs, and back then jazz was not really um, cauterized in the institutional
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
academic world.
sure,
It
sure.
was like you learned it on the streets. So
Yeah,
I figured I had been doing a lot of jazz. By that time, I had played with J.J. Johnson, and I had played with Freddie Hubbard, and I had played with these people. When I went to USC, I went there as a composition major because I wanted to understand the European take on music.
you went there to figure out the stuff you didn't know, not to reinforce what you already knew.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
yeah, I kind of didn't know both, but I knew jazz a little better and I felt more familiar with it. But classical music also intrigued me, and I didn't know much about it. But that wasn't the only reason. The
right.
other reason is that I just simply loved putting things together and
Yeah.
composing things and coming up with, kind of blueprints for pieces.
That is apparent in everything you do. And I mean, we can go. I was going to go through some other stuff, but we can come back to that. But I've been spending the last few days absorbing myself in our. This is our all-night jazz collection of your
Wow.
music, and there's even more. And
Yeah.
you're a craftsman, Billy. You're a friend of mine, a mutual colleague of ours, described you as having an unreasonable amount of skill, which I thought was a really lovely phrase.
Unreasonable. Would that
An
be true?
unreasonable amount of skill. But you're the craft for you is very important, and the sophistication. And the jazz in 2001, you released 2001. You put a band together, your jazz chamber music ensemble, which was a kind of
Right.
rhythm section plus string quartet. Then your
Exactly.
first album, the lyric album here
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
2004.
Hmm.
But tell me, what was the motivation behind that? Because you've always had the influence of both worlds, but on this one, you were kind of saying it is this. This is jazz
Yeah.
chamber music. So,
Yeah. I kind
and
of
can I add a second question? Go, what do you
Oh,
say?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Back of
Sorry.
your mind.
Yeah.
This is wonderfully successful. I think there are many examples of this kind of music that are not. So I want to just talk about that.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, okay. So, yeah, I wanted to, well, I wanted to, that was very kind of a conscious decision to call it something.
Right?
I
Yeah,
figure if you call it something, then it kind of crystallizes in people's mind the thing that you're trying to communicate. This is a genre, you
yeah.
know. So I wanted to call it jazz chamber music. I'm sure the term has been used before, you know. I wanted to put this band together for a few reasons. First of all, I love the combination of piano and guitar, piano and acoustic guitar.
Larry
But
Coons, yeah.
yeah, Larry Coons is incredible. But in many situations where I've played with guitar, there's kind of like a clash between harmonic concepts, right? Which could be disastrous.
Yeah, yeah,
So I figured, but I love the sound of the two
yeah.
instruments together. So if I could like kind of put it in situations where they wouldn't clash, that would be cool. And then I thought, why stop there? Why not add another string instrument, harp? So the nucleus of the group is piano, guitar, and harp. And then the drums, the rhythm section, and the saxophone, which is the lead voice,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
kind of supports that. And
Right.
then and then I added string quartet too, an actual established member of the chamber group family, right?
Sure, sure. Yeah, of the repertoire. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I added all of this in. It turns out to be like eight string instruments and two non-string instruments, which gives the sound kind of, in my mind, an impressionistic sound. You know, a la-
it really does. Yeah.
yeah. So I did that. Also, I want to include that I did a commission for a wind quintet called the Dorian Wind Quintet. Incredible wind quintet out of New York. And I had never written, in that commission, I was supposed to write a piece for wind quintet and piano. So I was performing with them. And when I wrote the piece and rehearsed with them, it really transformed my conception of jazz and chamber music.
Really?
Yeah, because I had never rehearsed in such detail
Yeah,
with
right,
such a high level classical situation where they would
right, right.
ask me, okay, in measure 42,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
beat three, the phrase extends to 40.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Yeah.
what that made me have to do is I had to know exactly why I wrote everything that I wrote.
Yeah, because when we're rehearsing in jazz, we might be like, yeah, take a second bass chorus, or okay,
Yeah,
let's repeat those, or let's groove on an ostinato or drum solo now. But we don't say when you finish that phrase in bar 42, can you have a legato diminuendo? We don't
but
do
yeah,
that, do we?
yeah.
Yeah,
And it kind of might work against some jazz situations to do that, you know.
absolutely. Yeah,
It would like take away the requisite freedom that you would
yeah,
need
right, right.
to make something spontaneous. But in this world, it was necessary because the way they
Yeah,
arrive at a spontaneous sounding thing is to be clear on every little detail so that it
yeah,
sounds like
yeah,
a
yeah.
living, breathing organism. So I said, why not take that ethos and apply it to a jazz situation, you know?
And let me just verbalize some of my experience with this and similar musics, which is sometimes when you hear projects like this, here's what you hear. Jazz is happening, cool, jazz, yeah, grooving, soloing, stop, string quartet,
Right, right, right.
string quartet, and go jazz, yeah, jazz, jazz.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
I, I even heard there's a British composer, and it was Peter Erskine and Schofield. This was in London 20 years ago with the London Symphony Orchestra, some of the most amazing musicians in the world. And it literally felt like that. Go
Yeah, yeah.
jazz, stop jazz. With this, Billy, I mean, if the highest compliment I can pay you, and you don't need my compliments because it won a Grammy and it's a
Well,
masterpiece, but at no point did I feel I was going in and out of two worlds. I felt like this was how you conceived it.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, which was an amazing achievement. It's not like, oh yeah, the viola's coming in now because I need to double
right,
my left hand or
right, right, right. Yeah. Well, I feel like I want to leave it to the composition. I make it the responsibility of the composition to bring the genres together, not
oh nice,
yeah,
nice.
not demand that like write every note for the drums out or demand that the strings swing or take a solo unless
Right.
that they're comfortable doing that. But I'm much more comfortable treating a string quartet in the tradition of Beethoven,
Yeah,
Mendelssohn,
yeah,
and Ravel, and you know the lineage of that, and the drums in the tradition of Brian Blade, you know,
yeah, yeah.
who's actually on the, or
Yeah, he's on that. Yeah,
Antonio Sanchez or Smitty Smith, you know,
yeah,
these great drummers, you
yeah.
know, and let them orchestrate as they will. I think that also I learned a lot from my dear friend, rest in peace, Lyle Mays, who
Oh man, we've lost so many recently, haven't we? And he's the one
yeah,
for me who also just went really deep because he wasn't an old man and just yeah.
no,
But
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about Lyle Man for a minute. I'd love to hear your
Yeah, but one of the things that we talked about was using the solo section as a device, as a compositional device, rather than just a solo section where you start blowing. The solo section gets you from point A to point B. You
yeah.
know, like so when in 1989, Pat Metheny invited me to see his concert, right? And I saw it, and those concerts where you walk in one way and leave a completely different person.
Oh man, that's
Yeah,
lovely.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I do,
Yeah,
I do.
I had never heard them live. I heard a few things on record, and I was like, yeah, they're good. And I went in there, and it changed
Yeah,
my whole.
yeah.
After that, I said, I got to write stuff like this. And one of the things that
Wow,
they did,
really? It was that big?
yeah, one of the things that they did was, especially on the tune "The First Circle," right, which completely blew my mind apart. You know, it starts out with these clappings
Yeah, that's right.
and ends this big, burst of sound. It's almost
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
wind rushing by.
yeah,
But one of the things they did was the piano solo is such a beautifully constructed
yeah,
thing that Lyle can't play anything that's not beautiful. Um, and but also it built to this climax, and all of a sudden this new section happened, which was a logical conclusion to
Yeah,
this climax.
Billy, with all of Lyle's stuff in the Pat Metheny group, do you think, Pat, I know that there were a collaboration, but do you think, because it feels to me like Lyle will often take his solo, even from one atmosphere, one emotion, he'll build and build, and then he'll take it into a new groove, or
Yeah,
do you think Pat said to him, hey man, do whatever you want, but make sure that the end of your solo is up here rather than
yeah,
down
yeah,
here?
yeah.
Is
I
that,
don't, I don't know their process. I don't know Pat. I mean, I know Pat obviously on a cursory level. I was very close friends with Lyle,
oh
uh,
man, wow.
but I don't know. I didn't know their process, but what it sounds like to me um, is that they kind of collaborated on certain things. Like it was almost like Lennon and McCartney or something.
Yeah, right, right,
Uh,
right,
like they collaborate. They had like Pat may have had a melodic idea or
right,
a structural idea, and maybe Lyle put some different harmonies to it that might not have occurred to Pat, and kind of structured it, and had some ideas about it structurally this way. I think it was kind of symbiotic. They both are extraordinarily brilliant musicians, so and at that level, it's hard to say who did what.
right,
Uh,
right.
but I think Lyle's imprint on the Pat Metheny group is indelible, and it's
Yeah. Do you know, do you have any
how's
inkling?
how's that for a political answer?
Yeah, well, yeah. No, I know exactly the what you're saying.
Yeah.
Do you know? I mean, if you were close to Lyle, do you know why for the last 10 years or so of his life he wasn't really in the business or in the art form? I mean, he wasn't playing much. He wasn't doing much. You got any inkling as to why?
I don't know. Uh, maybe he maybe he I don't know. I don't want to speculate on
Yeah,
like
sure.
the dynamic between him and Pat, but I think that there might have been something that happened where he maybe felt unfulfilled or
Right.
unappreciated or something like that. That's but that's of course that is just my take looking on the outside. But also Lyle was a polymath,
Yeah, yeah,
and was music was just one of the things that he was
yeah, yeah.
excellent at. He also achieved the same standard of excellence as a software programmer, as a chess master, as an architect. He designed someone's house. Um, he played pool like Minnesota Fats. Yeah, I mean, he was a genius. He was
Yeah, yeah,
really a genius. And so I think he might have just gone into these other
right,
areas, and
right.
music was not really enough to sustain his interests.
His
You
brain,
know,
his immense brain. Wow,
yeah.
wow. Billy, so we've spoken a bit about your classical influences and the importance of that to you. Let's go back a little bit because I want to. You were sort of saying by the time you had all these offers from USC and New School and
Uh-huh.
New England Conservatory, and that you were already playing jazz at a very high level. You were toured with J.J. Johnson. You were in Freddie Hubbard's band towards the end of his career. So, but how did you get good at jazz? When did you get good at jazz? If you were already formed as a jazz musician and you wanted to work on your classical chops, did you always improvise? Were you taught
Well,
as a kid?
I started playing piano when I was like 14, like I
What?
started yeah, I know. I started getting serious when I was 14. I
That's
took,
late.
I know it was. And I was kind of like um, in this situation at a boarding school for boys called Midland. Now it's co-ed. Um, but back when I went in the early 70s, it was a boarding school. I was the only black person in the entire county. There was there was no girls, so there was no
No girls
distraction.
and no black people.
Yeah, yeah. So I was kind of by myself.
That's barely a life.
I started there and I heard Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and I immediately said I want to do that. Keith Emerson is another guy who turned my life around.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow, interesting.
yeah. He made me want to play piano for a living. You know, when I heard that, because I had heard Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea and Joe Zawinul and
Yeah.
McCoy before, and I liked jazz, but I didn't think really I want to do this. But then when I heard Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I was like, this. I mean, this speaks to me, in a very, very intimate way. I got good. I guess jazz just spoke to me, and
Yeah, yeah.
and it just made sense to me immediately. As soon as Herb Bickman showed me these things, like Bill Evans type things, and reharmonizations of tunes, as soon as I got that under my brain, then a whole new door was
But you're
open.
saying between the age of 0 and 14, you didn't play the piano at all, or you were
No, no,
just
no,
not seriously?
not seriously. I took piano lessons when I was 6,
Right.
and
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I went in one ear, out the other. Again,
Yeah.
when I was like 11 or so, and took cello lessons.
But at 16, you're taking it seriously. By your early 20s, you're playing with J.J. Johnson. Talk
Yeah.
about Freddie Hubbard, man. I mean, towards the end of Freddie's career, you hear stories about Freddie Hubbard. I mean, you were in his band for 6 years. You were touring, recording.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
One of the giants, man. I mean, I'd love to hear about
Yeah.
what
Well,
with Freddie Hubbard.
Freddie is to me the greatest trumpet. I mean, there's maybe when you say the greatest trumpet player, it's subjective because there's like, Dizzy Gillespie, there's Miles Davis, there's Louis Armstrong, there's
Miles Davis is never the greatest trumpet player, but you could
yeah,
definitely say he's one of the greatest musicians who happen to
yeah,
play the
yeah.
trumpet.
And
Yeah.
and actually, he's pretty great on the trumpet in that he turned the trumpet kind of into a human voice,
Yeah.
more effectively, I think, than most.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
but in terms of just playing the trumpet, I don't think anybody has matched
No.
Freddie. Sorry, my eye itches. Um, yeah, I don't think anybody has matched Freddie, and I take the Pepsi challenge on that with anybody.
We
Um,
believe you.
yeah, I mean, I've heard stuff where it just, what he's playing shouldn't come out of a trumpet. It should come out of a saxophone or a piano.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
he was a flawed individual, and the stories you hear are colorful, and not suited for this interview. But
And true then. And true. The stories you hear are colourful
yeah,
and true.
yeah. I mean, I could, there's a lot of funny, very funny stories, of him being outlandish, But one thing I want to say is that with all this flawed behavior toward me, he was very kind. He was as kind as he could be. Sometimes he was very patient with me because
Wow. Okay.
yeah, in the sense that he would let me comp how I was going to comp. And the same is true with J.J. Johnson. He'd let me, even though I was getting all in his way, playing, what I thought was helping him,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, he'd endure it in his solo. When he could have had this person or that person on piano, he stuck with me.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and
interesting.
when he couldn't stand it anymore, he'd turn around and say, "Lay out," and I would lay out, you know. But he would encourage me when I played well, and he would actually tell me um, what things that I was doing wrong sometimes. He says,
Yeah.
"Man,
Yeah.
solo, you keep soloing up and down like a scale on a piano. Solo from the middle
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
go in and
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Shape your
Yeah.
lines, stuff like that,
You need people. It's always we're so sort of in our world when we're doing what we do. It's so when someone looks in on what you do, and then you're probably like, well, yeah, actually, I do tend to kind of do patterns, and you kind of
Yeah,
need that, don't you? But when it comes from him, I would imagine that's more
yeah.
valuable than 4 years at school, right?
Oh man, what he gave me, you couldn't buy in
Yeah.
a jazz education.
Yeah.
Um, but he also was. He would curb his errant behavior around me as though
Oh,
I was like his son or something, and he didn't want to. Like, even if he was drunk off his ass, he would refrain from he would try to refrain from like cursing too much or getting too out there with it, when I was around, you know.
That's really charming and kind of endearing, really, that he
Yeah,
felt some, yeah. That's
yeah,
really lovely.
he would do that. And when I would get pissed at him, he would he wouldn't come down like squash me like a bug like he could have. He would listen to like one time I was playing and he was talking during my solo. Like, I mean, it wasn't like just little conversation. It was like, and it was a distraction. So I just went bum bum, like banged on the piano, like that. In the middle of the solo is a ballad too, you know. And he looked at me like funny and then stopped, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Well, he probably respected that you were standing up for yourself. And Billy, there's so much I want to talk about. So let's jump forward a bit. The Grammys love you, man. I mean, my gosh, 5 Grammy wins, 16 Grammy nominations. That incredible. I didn't know this until a week ago. This is your 2014 The Map to the Treasure Reimagining Laura Nyro. And this opened up a world for me in the last week because I knew I was talking to you. And it's an amazing project. And I've got a specific question about it. And I think, well, you're working with very diverse artists. You've got your core rhythm section, but you might have Renee Fleming, you might have Yo-Yo Ma, Sting, Becca Stevens is on there, I think, Dianne Reeves.
Mm-hmm.
But I listened to it in one... Sorry?
Sting's not on it.
Is he not? Okay, my bad, sorry.
No.
You have worked with Sting, though, I think.
Yeah.
I listened to it in one sitting, and it hangs together as an album despite this very diverse palette of personalities and artists and from different backgrounds. Is Larry Klein part of the answer to my question?
Oh, yeah. Larry, you have to... this was like a collaboration between me and Larry. I had this idea to do... Laura Nyro was a huge influence on me, as was Keith Emerson, as was Herbie Hancock, as was Paul Hindemith. These are like my early formative, like Joe Beam also. So I had the idea to do a Laura Nyro album, and it had been festering for like about 12 years or so before I did it. And one of the challenges was, do I want to have it be an instrumental album? Do I want it to have a singer, or do I want several singers? And I knew it couldn't be instrumental because she's such a part of her thing or her words. Sure. The words have to be included. And then I knew it couldn't be one singer because that singer would eventually be compared to Laura Nyro.
Right, and that's a really good point. Okay, I understand. Yeah.
So I knew it had to be several singers. So that's why it took so many years, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to pull it together. And then I just got impatient with it. I said, I have to do this album. It has to be done. So I called my manager, and my manager, Miles Weinstein, he made a few calls, and it ended up through a series of very fortunate circumstances, ended up being a project that Sony Masterworks did, and they threw the bank at it,
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So, and I knew I always wanted to work with Larry Klein, because Larry Klein is just an incredible producer, and he's like my friend. He was in my theory class with Miriam Usler.
I was reading about that. You two have been buddies since you were teenagers.
Since we were 16, And so, and he got me the gig with Freddie Hubbard too. He was a bass player.
Cool.
Hubbard. So our lives have been kind of like intertwining.
Yeah, right.
And for this project, I asked him to produce it, and he said yes. Because I know his expertise with working with singers and getting the best out of them, and
that Joni Mitchell record with Vince Mendoza. I mean, just all that incredible.
Yeah, or the Herbie Hancock record,
Rivers,
which won the album of the year. So this, I did all the arranging, right? And the initial idea to do Laura Nyro was my idea, but once we started doing it, it became kind of a collaboration
Oh, yeah,
where he would have ideas and I'd have ideas, and we'd come to a consensus about it. It actually worked very well together. We on the musical end, we collaborated extremely well. Things ran smoothly, and
yeah, yeah.
you know we both, because I think we both, even though we went our separate ways, he describes himself as a minimalist and I'm a maximalist, you know. Um, and,
Yeah,
and so, but even,
you are. I can see that. Yeah, I can see that now. Sorry, Karen. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and even with these different conceptions, we both are kind of the same age. We were influenced by the same music, so we have the same conception. So we came up with this idea. We discussed um, the casting of it. So he knew Renee Fleming, I knew Yo-Yo Ma, and that came together.
yeah.
He knew Ricky Lee Jones, I knew Becca Stevens, I knew Diane, and he
Yeah,
knew, it was like we pulled our resources
yeah.
together.
Right, 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 right,
Uh,
right. And okay, so this is I'm going to do a two-part question, extending from what you said, and this is more or slightly stretching the conversation a bit wider to music, society, the creative environment we live in now. There was enough in, is it Laura Nyro or Nyro?
Nero.
Sorry, I said it wrong. My apologies.
That's okay.
There's enough in Laura Nyro's music for you as an artist, as a supremely gifted, creative, a master of, let's just call it art music for want of a better word. There's enough in her songs for you to want to get inside them,
Yeah.
kind of dig around, reinvent them, and then present them to the world, win a Grammy. I mean, it also introduced me to her music, and her music's not that well known in the UK. So I mean, I'm not in the
Right.
UK now, but I am British, and so
Mhm.
that was really lovely. There isn't much in the contemporary pop music world that you're going to want to get into in the same way. Are you concerned that the gap between the world that we occupy in terms of jazz, classical music, somewhat creative art forms, and the world of pop music is growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and which will make a project like this in 20, 30 years' time not possible? No one's going to try and jump into Taylor Swift's back catalogue and put strings and Yo-Yo Ma. I mean, so talk a bit about that. I mean,
Well, I
Laura
think.
Nyro was a pop artist, a singer-songwriter, folk, sure, but she was successful.
Mhm.
The gap's growing bigger. Where does that leave us?
Well, I mean, I, I remain optimistic about things. I am not going to accept that nothing is possible, that something is impossible. Especially when it comes to expression of art. I would suggest to people who want to do things that are ambitious to keep your eye on it, to never lose sight of that vision, that thing that you want to do, but keep your eye on the practical aspects of how to do it.
Yeah,
It's going to cost money. And also do it even though people say that it's impractical, it doesn't make sense, in today's society. Yes, Taylor Swift and Cardi B and all of this, this sensibility. There's these producers, Max Martin and other guys, I think there's maybe two or three, that produce records with this formula that has kind of like kind of dominated the pop music scene. It's a real formula that, in the same way that fast food is a drug
yeah,
type food that people get addicted to, this music that
yeah,
is like,
yeah,
compressed to the
yeah,
point where it just like slams you in the face.
yeah.
So that it doesn't matter if you're listening to it on your iPhone or.
It's so you can listen to it like this.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Which
right.
is,
Yeah. So that's always going to be there. I mean, you go back to Napster, Spotify, Steve Jobs with iTunes to trace the disintegration of concept music,
yeah,
the
yeah,
or the disintegration of the public's, embracing of concept music.
sure. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And veering towards convenient. Everything is like geared towards convenience.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it's
yeah,
like I want the music now and fast,
yeah, yeah.
and I want it to sound good in a way
Straight,
that's
straight
agreeable.
away. I want it to sound good
Yeah,
straight away. I don't want an introduction or a,
yeah.
get straight to it.
Or
Yeah,
to actually actively participate in it sounding good. You
yeah,
know, which means, the music, you listen to it and then you think about things and then you connect with it. And then it sounds good because it's enriching to your soul. This type of music, this type of pop music, which is popular today, is enriching temporarily. Like and then it's over like cotton candy. You know,
I'm not even sure how enriching it is. I mean, I find,
well, enriching is the wrong word, but titillating and satisfying.
I think it covers silence. I think people are afraid of silence, and
Yeah,
so
right.
it covers some silence.
Right, exactly. I think that's true. So, but in light of all that, human beings remain human. I think the same people that are being bombarded and slammed by music in the elevators, in the taxi cabs, in the, whatever, wherever you hear it and wherever it comes into you unannounced and unasked for, people who have been subjected to this, which meaning everybody, are still human and can go to a concert and be affected
Yeah,
by good music and music. People still need, I think, with all of this bullshit that is like surrounding us, um, there is even a greater need for soul enriching music
yeah,
and
yeah,
art.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I refused, I refuse, and I teach students who have a voice to also refuse to succumb to the the dire situation, the despair of the futility of it. It's not futile.
Great. That's very inspiring, Billy, and really, really quite powerful. It's lovely to hear you say that. In the same vein, some of your more commercial projects, you toured and recorded with Chris Botti for a few years, and I've been listening to some of your, I mean, more commercial, and I mean they are, but I mean they're beautiful
Yeah, yeah.
records. Those Chris Botti records, I love them. Um, I think I know the answer from what you just said. But when you're touring with Chris Botti,
Hmm.
and you're on stage in Milan or a big festival, hopefully coming up, outdoors in the south of France, 20,000 people. Um, that's version A, and then you're with your trio in
Right.
Smalls in New York City. Is
Hmm.
there any moment when you're on stage with Chris Botti where your language, you want to fly into something really quite outside the changes, really quite kind of chromatic,
Yeah, yeah.
and you don't because you're on stage with Chris Botti? Do you ever have that thought? Or are you just going to be, no, I'm Billy Charles, this is what I do, and if you
Yeah.
don't want this language, you're not going to call me?
Well, Chris is an extraordinary musician,
Yeah, agree.
very a great trumpet player,
Beautiful.
who has made a conscious decision that he is going to keep his music within limits that his audience can understand.
Yeah,
You know, and so yeah, oftentimes there was a conflict with me being on stage. Um, the level of musicianship with Chris, his band was as high as any jazz band that I've played. It's extraordinarily high. It was, and when I first joined Chris, it was more kind of like a jazz band. It was piano, bass, uh, piano, bass, drums, guitar, and trumpet, and a single singer.
right.
And then as certain, albums came out, as certain popularity grew
Yeah,
and
yeah.
grew, then he added a violinist, he added another singer, he added another keyboardist, and then he started changing the show the concert into more like a
Show.
show,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it still retained a high level of musicianship, but the musicianship was now pointed at popularity and popular consumption. So a lot of the songs then became less um, like stretching out
Yeah,
became
yeah, sure.
less of a priority, and doing the same things that were successful became more of a priority, and that was in direct conflict with what I was trying to do. Um,
So how did that end up?
it ended up I left, or I was I was asked to leave.
Right, 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 right.
um,
That's thanks so much for sharing that, man.
it was,
That's really
yeah,
interesting.
it
Yeah,
was, yeah, it was kind of, and I don't think Chris would have a problem with my saying this, but it was true. I mean, his direction was different than what my direction was,
yeah,
and a lot of time it turned into like because the gig paid very well,
yeah.
and so it enabled me to do my jazz chamber projects.
Right, right.
And Chris, to his credit, was also very generous as a band leader.
That's
Um,
great. That's great.
he would allow us to sell CDs on the gig,
Wow.
and make money from that. And
Yeah,
there are a lot of people who don't allow that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He was very fair
yeah.
as a person. It's just his music conception drifted apart from what mine was.
Well, this is great, man. Thank you so much for all these kind of insights into the real world. Because Lila Bialy, who was a previous guest on this show for All Night Jazz, and I knew your music from Rebirth from a few years ago when we met at the conference in Florida, and I knew some of your older stuff, and I knew you as a virtuoso modern jazz piano player. And then Lila Bialy was saying that you were the piano player in Chris Botti's band, and I was like,
Right.
really? But Billy's like, and Chris Botti's like, and so, so now we've had the inside track on how that kind of came
Yeah,
about,
well,
and then how it changed slightly as well.
actually, I mean, if I did a jazz album and Chris wanted to do it, I would call him and
Yeah,
play him,
yeah,
because he can really play, and
yeah,
I would love to have him play some free. So I mean, he really has great
yeah,
ideas and mastery of the instrument,
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I want this clear, that this is not a diss to Chris
No, I
Ball,
didn't think it was in any way. No, no, it's not coming across as that at all.
because yeah, he is. The gig that I chose to do the gig, and I stayed with it, and and he was very clear at the outset. This is what I
Yeah,
want to do,
yeah,
and so I did it. But I met Lila on that, and I heard her because she was opening, and I was like, wow, who is this? She was really great. I wanted to work with her. It never panned out, but
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will.
yeah,
Billy, I want to talk about your new record, which is very exciting. There's lots going on in your life. I also think, from listening to your whole discography, I think you're getting better all the time, which is kind of scary. I mean, in 30 years, I can't wait for that record. It's going to be amazing. Billy, you talk about the way you work. You've got a commission from the LA Phil or from whoever it is that you're working with. Dianne Reeves calls you, wants some arrangements, so and so wants
yeah,
an original. You've got a new trio record. You're in your studio. We can see a bit of your gear. Talk about how you
yeah.
approach a project. Are you very disciplined? Are you not disciplined at all? What's your methods?
Well, it depends on the project. Like, for instance, I'm still working on that violin concerto, because all of the crap of 2020 has been
Yeah,
a major distraction. I should have finished by March, but I just couldn't. I couldn't even get the motivation to compose.
right,
You
right,
know.
right,
But
right.
now I'm feeling a lot better, and things are
Yeah,
moving toward the end.
yeah.
So with the violin concerto, and with all classical commissions. I'm sorry, it's something that's stuck here.
Who's the
Uh,
violin concerto for, Billy?
Rachel Barton Pine, who is, one of the top
Top
violinists.
classical players, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And, this will be my third commission for her.
Wow.
I wrote a solo violin piece, and then a piece for violin and piano. And now it seems to
Getting
keep,
bigger and bigger.
yeah. But for things like that, for the commissions, for violin and orchestra, or just a straight orchestra piece, or something else, something that has a large ensemble, I'll write a short score. So, and I'll write it on string quartet format. So two
Yeah.
treble clefs, an alto clef, and a bass clef.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
and that allows me to be able to designate, lines. I'll just write abstract music. I'll write notes and
Yeah,
harmonies, melodies and harmonies that I think are cool, counterpoint and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah,
And I'll do that so that I can then, it's easy to orchestrate.
yeah.
And
Right,
sometimes I'll blow off what I wrote and just orchestrate straight into the score, you
right,
know.
right.
But I use that as a template. When
Yeah,
I'm writing stuff for my jazz situations, it depends. I might write with that format because it might be highly contrapuntal, it might be chamber music-ish. Or if I'm writing a tune, then I just write it on the piano.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I have
yeah.
different methods.
Yeah. But do you lock yourself in your room for 18 hours and don't leave until it's done, or you kind of a bit of it comes to you in the car and a bit of it's whilst you're doing the dishes, or are you very methodical?
Yeah, well, I'm methodical when I get down to it. I'm not a person that, okay, from 10 until 1 in the afternoon I'm gonna compose, every day, and then stop, and then from, you know 4 until 8 I'll compose again.
Yeah,
I don't do it that way. I just kind of compose when I say, okay, either I'm feeling an urgency, like, oh shoot, I haven't composed, I better compose, um, or I feel, oh, I have this idea, or I feel like this. It's never an idea. It's more like an impulse, like a need to
yeah.
get something out, you know. And so I'll do that, and then it depends. It depends. I might just after 45 minutes to say, ah, screw it, I can't. Or I might be at it for 8 hours.
Yeah,
A lot of it depends on like tea and coffee and caffeine.
I love what you said about it being an impulse. I don't know if you've got any words of wisdom to share with our listeners, viewers, but um, for me too, I think if you just said write something, I could write something that would have some kind of musical syntax that would be perfectly plausible and logical. But the good stuff comes when there's a response, a need to something happening in your life or externally, or Rachel Bottom Pine calling you and saying, I want a concerto. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a, yeah. And that's, so how are we going to make our music valuable? How are we going to make what we do valuable moving forward beyond this pandemic? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I think your music has to speak. It has to be truthful, number one, and it has to speak to a human condition. I think music is as valuable as how it connects to the listener,
Yeah, that's
and
the whole
how,
value is in that relationship. The
yeah,
entire value.
and
Yeah,
therefore it has different values for different people.
yeah, yeah,
But if it moves a person to be inspired to think or change or stay the same or whatever, do good or be healing, then it's valuable.
yeah,
And I think your music should speak to. Nowadays, it seems like with so much going on, the climate is such that the there is a lot of value in music being a political tool. Um, there is.
Where do you come down on that? Do you think before you announce your piece, you should say, you know, by the way, the current president isn't a great guy. I mean, that's not rocket science, but
That's,
where do you
that's,
come down on that?
that's a euphemism. The president isn't a great guy.
I'm from England.
Yeah,
We're very reserved.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. He's.
It seems to me that he is not a great guy. Is my
Yeah,
impression.
yeah, yeah. I think a little more can be said about what kind of guy he is, but yeah, I think in all concert situations, I encourage students also to do this, is to announce the piece, to tell the story of the piece,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
or because it gives the listener a way in. Too often you'll see people who are young, especially, just like they just got out of. It looks like they're in their practice room
yes, yeah,
at
yeah, 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 yeah.
university on stage, and they're looking at each other, and then occasionally they'll go woo,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, 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 yeah,
My friend Tim LaFave always he used to refer to it as self woos. You know, when people like play something and they're just so impressed with it, they'll go woo. You know.
You've got a new album coming out on
Yeah,
Mac Avenue in a couple of weeks.
yeah,
So it's called Acceptance.
yeah.
I've heard a little bit about it. Tell us about the project. I mean, your last three records have won Grammys, so
Uh,
no
you,
pressure.
you know, I know. Well, it's always nice to get that acknowledgement and those accolades, but it may sound like a cliche, but it's not why I do the album, you know. And so, I would, I always, I liked, I'm like Magic Johnson or Larry Bird. I like to win, but, if it doesn't happen, then fine too, so be it, but the reason that I put out the records is to make a statement. So acceptance, um, I mean, as you get older, you have to accept certain things about life. The aging, like people you were close with pass away, or relationships dissolve. Like Joni Mitchell said, now old friends are acting strange. They shake their heads. They say, I've changed, and something's lost and something's gained in living every day. You know,
Right,
and
you're giving me chills just saying that, man.
yeah, and so the album is about that. And it's kind of an extension, group wise or instrumentation wise, of Rebirth.
Yeah.
It's the same core group. It's the same core quartet. Eric Harland on drums, Hans Glavishnig on bass, Steve Wilson on sax, and me on
Right.
piano. On Acceptance, I add Elena Pinderhughes, who
Flute
plays.
player.
Yeah, she sounds.
She's wicked, man. She's
Yeah.
wicked. I saw her in London a couple of years ago with
Oh,
Christian
Christian Scott.
Christian Scott. Yeah, very cool.
She's serious. And she sounds great on this one tune. It's a tune I wrote dedicated to my friend Dori Kaimi. It's called Dori.
Is she from LA as well? Is she on your side of the world?
Well, she's from Oakland, I think.
Okay.
But she lives in New York. She was talking to me about moving to LA, but since all of this happened,
Yeah,
I
right,
don't know what's
right,
happening with that.
right,
But
right.
then Alicia Olatuja is singing
Focus.
on this. Uh, who else?
It's all your own music? It's all
It's
your own.
mostly my own music and a standard I do. It never entered my mind, which is a dedication to Mulgrew Miller, who is a dear friend of mine, and actually I learned the tune from Mulgrew. Um, so yeah, Sarah Gazarek is singing some
Oh,
background.
nice. Nice.
Aubrey Johnson, who is Lyle Mays' niece, is singing on it. Uh,
Oh, sorry, what's the name?
Aubrey Johnson.
She's
And
Lyle Mays' niece.
yeah, and also she has an album out called Unraveled, which is great too.
Okay.
Munyungo Jackson is playing percussion. Rogerio Bocato's playing percussion also. Did I leave anybody out? I can't remember. But that's pretty much the group.
And there would have been a tour, and there would have been album
Yeah,
release concerts and everything else, and a Mac Avenue. I mean, presumably, I mean, God, talking frankly, you would have been selling CDs and vinyl and what have you, and merchandise on those gigs, and that was part of the
right.
equation with the album. That's not happening now. So,
No.
uh,
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was amazing to me that as this, like in March and April, when the pandemic was really raging here, and it seems to be raging again.
yeah,
Um, but when it was really raging, and I was talking to the people at Mac Avenue as though the album was just going to keep carrying on, and I was like, how is this even going to be possible? But you know, to their credit, they're like remaining resilient
right,
and
right.
resolute in like it's going to come out late August, and we're just going to tour. We're going to pick up where we left off when things
Yeah, yeah.
get back to some sort of normal. Please don't ever say the phrase "new normal"
Yeah,
to.
I thank you.
I,
It's
I hate that phrase.
Yeah, it comes with a sort of acceptance that things are
Yeah,
going to be worse. I can't stand that. I know. Just,
yeah,
but we'll do everything we can to get back to the best things of life as we want them to be. You're the
yeah,
first person to verbalize that. Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, I hate that. It makes my blood boil when I hear it because exactly what you said. It's like, oh, okay. It's just like you mean new resignation,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah, right. The new
Yeah,
crap. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
yeah, the rest of our lives is just going to be slightly crap.
Yeah, so that's normal. Then
Yeah.
that's a
Oh,
new normal.
oh my
Screw.
gosh.
Yeah,
Really, I want to just you talking from JJ Johnson to Elena Pinderhughes and everything in between. Your career span, that's kind of 40 years of jazz history and so many big names and stars. And on behalf of All Night Jazz and hopefully as big an audience as possible, thank you for all your music, man. And I know how much work it takes to get the volume of great art out there. And just
yeah.
as Quincy Jones says, keep on keeping on.
Keep on, keep
Um,
on.
Tell me a handful of bits of music. It doesn't need to be jazz, but maybe some jazz of music that always makes you smile. It just kind of gets you in there. It kind of
Yeah,
just a handful of
yeah,
tracks, songs, solos, jazz artists that always
yeah.
really tickle you.
Cool. I will. Tickle me. I like that. You are British.
Can't change
Yeah,
that.
so some of the pieces that I really love, that always give me continued pleasure would be Mathis der Mahler by Paul Hindemith. That it's just
It doesn't swing at all.
actually it does, especially on the Temptation of Saint Anthony. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 da 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 da.
I'm
I
going to put
can,
that on on CD as soon as we finish this phone conversation because when I was in my late teens, I adored that music and I probably haven't heard it for 20 years. So, yeah,
yeah, it's I still put it on occasionally. The First Circle by Pat Metheny is another one that just kills me, slays me every time.
yeah,
Um, New York Tinderberry by Laura Nero. I Have a Dream by Herbie Hancock off of The Prisoner. Um,
oh, yeah,
and also You'll Know When You Get There from her, or Actual Proof, the Herbie. Mike Clark gives that,
yeah,
you know, like kind of game changing drum
yeah,
performance on
yeah,
that. The Leprechaun by Chick Corea, um, or Now He Sings, Now He Sobs by
yeah,
Chick Corea. Time for Tyner, McCoy Tyner.
yeah,
Um, Samuel Barber, his violin concerto, or his symphony, or Vanessa, the opera.
right.
There's so many. Yeah, there's Ravel, L'Enfant et les Sortilèges. Is an
Whoa, yeah,
opera.
heavy man.
Yeah,
Uh,
or Gaspard de la Nuit.
yeah, yeah.
And
Billy, and before we wrap up, the sort of your favorite music and the music that makes you smile, and some of your favorite tracks. We had Chick Corea, and we had Lyle and Herbie. Can you give us two or three names of maybe younger artists and the new generation music that you've heard in the last 10 years or so that also grabs your ear and that you enjoy and we should all look out for?
um, let me see. Um, I heard the Punch Brothers, and I really liked that.
Oh, sorry.
Chris Steele.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah. Well, the Kendrick Lamar album "To Pimp a Butterfly" really knocked me out.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Um, uh, what
Do you like
else?
what Kamazi's doing? Do you like what Kamazi's doing? Washington's doing with his career?
I like the fact that it's
Epic.
epic. Well, he's
Big.
gotten a lot of
Yeah.
attention. I like Kamasi. It's a different direction than what I would do,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I appreciate the fact that really he's putting LA, the new generation of LA,
Yeah.
on the map.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
Cool.
like Linda O. Her,
Yeah. Pat Metheny's bass player.
Yeah, but her own projects
Okay.
too.
Yeah.
Um, I like Mary Halverson, you know, a lot. I like this is this guy Joel Ross
Yeah, our vibes player.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's and other people. There's got to be other people too, though.
Well,
But
you've given us lots of
yeah.
names of people we can check out. So yeah, no, they're all they're all. I know of Joel. I don't know his music. It'd be wonderful to check it out. And
Oh, my
here we
f-
go.
my favorite young pianist is Sullivan Fortner. I love him.
Well, he was my previous interviewee to you, so
Really?
his
Yeah,
interview's going out next week,
yeah,
and then yours. So he'll be wow, man. I agree. He's you know when you sort of you feel like you've heard everything, and you feel like
yeah.
just these 88 keys, and like what can we do with them that's not been done, and what voicing, what shapes,
Yeah.
and then I heard his recording with Cecile McClure and Salvon that won the Grammy, and like
Yeah,
you, I was just like, whoa,
I
like
know.
it
But
was so.
also Christian Sands is great too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
Aaron Deal. It's a lot of great pianists. But
yeah,
Sullivan Fortner for me really is like,
yeah,
yeah, it's like you said. It's like how does he even hear that? How does he even
yeah.
How can he hear it and then how can he execute it?
Yeah,
How can your mind move that fast?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice, man. I agree. I agree.
Yeah. I would actually put him on the top above the other ones that I mentioned.
Okay. Thank you on behalf of our listeners, All Night Jazz, and like I said, everyone listening, thank you so much for your time and to giving us an insight into your musical world, the stuff you love, and your hopes and fears and everything else. It's been really, really valuable.